witness. Mr. Kodiaga, do you have another witness to call?
Thank you, Judge. The state calls DCI agent Jon Turbett to the stand.
All right. Sir, I'll have you come on up and just take a seat to my far left, if you would. All right, please raise your right hand. Sir, do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you'll be giving in these proceedings will be the truth?
I do.
Okay. And sir, for the record, can you please provide us with your first name and your last name and spell them for us?
Jon Turbett, that's Jon, and the last name is Turbett.
All right, Mr. Kodiaga.
Thank you, Judge. So, you've stated your name. How are you currently employed?
I'm employed with the Iowa Department of Public Safety, and specifically their Division of Criminal Investigation, we call it DCI.
How long have you been with this Division of Criminal Safety?
I'm just beginning my 26th year.
Can you tell us your education and training to be in this position?
I have a 4-year Bachelor of Arts degree from Coe College in Political Science, and I have a law degree from the University of Iowa College of Law, and then I attended a 19-week police academy for the state before becoming a sworn officer.
Are you therefore a peace officer in the state of Iowa?
Yes.
And we've talked about DCI to this jury, but there's some people who may not know what DCI really is. Can you just briefly tell us what DCI is in relation to other police departments in the state of Iowa?
Yes. We're oftentimes described as a rural law enforcement kind of assistance agency. So local police departments, sheriff's offices are able to call us 24/7, and we would dispatch agents like myself. We're plainclothes detectives, police officers, to assist local agencies with investigations.
As part of an agent at the DCI, have you had experience investigating cases involving homicides or major crimes?
Yes.
What's your experience in that?
Basically, my entire career, I was working death investigations or homicides within my first year. I've continued to do that, probably with increasing frequency. It's now a pretty significant part of what I do.
So were you involved in the investigation of the death of Ryan Cooper that brings us into this courtroom today?
Yes.
How did you become involved in this investigation?
I actually became involved several years after Ryan's murder in 2023. I was asked by my colleagues to assist with a review and then specifically some interviews.
So, fair to say that your specific role in the investigation was more of interviewing witnesses?
Yes, I think all that I did in this case was interviewing the defendant and several witnesses.
You talked about interviewing the defendant. Can you identify the person? Is that person Karina Cooper?
Yes.
Can you identify her in this courtroom?
Yes.
Will you please go ahead and do that? Your Honor, may the record reflect identification by the gesture of the hand.
The record so reflects.
Now, you talked about in the course of that investigation, you interviewed witnesses, including the defendant, Karina Cooper, correct?
Yes.
Do you remember the day that you conducted the interview with Karina Cooper?
Yes, that was May 4th, 2023.
Do you remember where you conducted the interview?
Yes, I was instructed the interview would take place at 1846 K Avenue in Traer, which I understood to be the scene of the murder as well.
That's the residence where the defendant lived at?
At one time, yes.
Okay. When you're doing this interview in 2023, Ryan Cooper was killed in 2021. Is that a fair?
Yes, I believe June 18th, 2021.
And what was the purpose of the interview that you're doing in 2023?
A couple of things were discussed. We wanted to see if the defendant had would hold to the same positions that she had several years prior, but also when we reviewed that, we just decided that it would be good to explore for more depth and more detail as well than what we had from a few years prior.
Was your interview, when you take the interview, were you just with the defendant and you at that point?
Was it just the two of us?
Yes.
Yes, ultimately, when I first arrived, Ryan's brother Aaron was also present, and I met the two of them on the driveway. I spent a little bit of time with Aaron. He toured me through the home so I could see where things had occurred. And then shortly after that, I met with the defendant, and it was just she and I at that point.
When you interview the defendant, do you ask her to tell you everything in detail about what happened and the nature of her relationship with Ryan Cooper?
Yes.
Part of that is, do you also want to know everything and have a know that nothing should be left out?
Yes, so an extremely important part of the interview would be to explain I'm interested in every detail, even things that people might think are not so important. So I will give examples like every conversation or every meal or even what you ate for a meal or what you were watching on TV. I tell them no details too small because we're very interested of what people are willing to share or not willing to share. We really are just probing for as much detail as possible in those interviews.
Did you ask her to give you an account of what happened that night?
Yes.
Starting from earlier evening, did you ask her to tell you what happened?
Yes.
What did she tell you?
So the evening prior to the murder, she says that the family had gone to a baseball game. They had come home, I believe, around 8 p.m., had pizza. They'd cleaned up and showered, and then she said really from that point on it was an uneventful evening. The children went to bed. She ends up in what they would call the master bedroom, I guess, in bed with two of the children. Ryan goes to sleep in his recliner, as was the norm for some time, and then she said that Cade had slept upstairs.
So you understood there were three children. One was called Cade, who was sleeping upstairs, and she was sleeping with two other children in the bedroom.
Yes, Cade would be the oldest, and she told me he was sleeping upstairs, and then the two younger, Cable and Cortland, would have been sleeping in the bed with her.
As you talked to her, did she report waking up during the night?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury what she told you about waking up during the night?
She said the first time she woke, there was no particular reason other than that was the norm. Her body was kind of on that cycle, her bladder, and so she would normally wake between 2 and 3 a.m. to go to the bathroom. And so she said at 3 a.m. she woke simply to go to the bathroom.
Did she tell you what her perception or observations of Ryan Cooper were at 3 a.m. when she went to the bathroom?
Yes, she reported that he was snoring and the TV was on, and so she went to the bathroom and just went back to bed.
So the TV was on and Ryan Cooper was snoring?
Yes.
On the recliner?
Yes.
Did she tell you what happened next?
She said she did fall back to sleep. She thought it was for a short period of time, and the next time that she woke was not for her bladder, but because she heard a crash.
Did she tell you what her thinking was in regards to the crash that she heard?
Yes, she said that she'd immediately assessed that as the shower caddy falling in the bathroom that was right next to the bedroom, and so she got up immediately to investigate.
How did she describe her getting up immediately to go investigate? What happened in that process?
She said she got out of the bed immediately and then had tripped over, they have a large dog, Ransom. She described him as a 100-pound Rottweiler. He was asleep at the foot of the bed, and so as she got out of the bed and made her way to the bathroom, she had tripped over the dog and then gone on to the bathroom.
Did she tell you if the dog made any noise?
She said the dog had made a woof, a small noise like that.
When she tripped over the dog?
Yes, I think she was saying either when she tripped on it or right before she tripped on it, perhaps as if he'd perceived the noise but didn't get up, or when she tripped on him. Right in that all happened in a short time frame.
According to her account, she tells you she goes to the bathroom.
Yes.
Then what did she tell you she does next?
She sees nothing in the bathroom, so she's there, very quickly, and then she moves on to the kitchen and sees nothing in the kitchen, and she describes, and we talk about for a little bit, her assessment. She looks out through the kitchen window into the well-lit driveway area, and she doesn't see any vehicles or any people in the kitchen or outside in the driveway area.
She describes the driveway as well lit.
Yes.
Once she looks outside the driveway and sees nothing or no vehicles or nobody, what does she do next?
She then moves on to the living room.
What does she say to you that she sees or does when she gets to the living room?
Her first perceptions that she described were the TV is now not on like it was now in sleep mode, so it had gone to sleep. And she goes over and turns on a lamp.
So now the TV is off
Yes,
and she turns on a lamp in the living room.
yes.
What does she tell you she sees or observes when she turns on the lamp in the living room?
So Ryan was still in his recliner. She turns the lamp on and she says, I see blood, lots of blood.
What does she describe that she does next once she sees lots of blood?
She begins screaming, and then she very quickly moves towards the stairs to go get Cade or intercept Cade as he's coming down the stairs.
So she tells you she runs upstairs to get Cade,
Yes.
who was the son who was sleeping upstairs.
Yes, that would be the oldest son that she said was sleeping upstairs.
Does she tell you the reason why she wants to get Cade?
I believe she says she doesn't want him to see things, so she tries to get him, on the stairs or upstairs and whisk him into the bedroom with the other two children and close him into that area so he doesn't see things or perceive things, I think.
She wants to lock him with the other kids in the bedroom.
Yes, so he can't see what's going on.
Now you talked about the dog, Ransom, and you described him that she told you is like 100-pound Rottweiler. Did she tell you how the dog typically behaved with strangers?
Yes, my recollection is she described him as this 100-pound Rottweiler. He was interested in people, seemed to be very much a family dog. We were kind of comparing notes. I mentioned my dog. So, for instance, she would talk about him spending time. He would roam the house at night and check in on the various family members, but interested in the family and people as they came.
Did she tell you he will typically bark at strangers?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
That Ransom will typically bark at strangers?
Yes.
You talked about his nighttime behavior. She described as a dog who would roam through the different rooms in the house.
Yes, she said that Ransom would roam. Sometimes he would spend time with Ryan out in the living room and sleep there for a while. He would sometimes go upstairs to see Cade or sleep up there a little bit, and then of course he would sleep in the bedroom as he was that night, she reported, when she tripped on him.
In fact, when you're discussing this, does she tell you about her bedroom door, whether it was open or closed, in relation to Ransom's behavior?
Yeah, I think in her description of the dog and his activities, I asked her, it occurred to me to ask, and I asked about the door, and she said the door was left open that night. It was at least partially open, so this large dog could come and go through the doorway as he pleased, since he was a roamer. Let's
talk about firearms. Did the question of firearms come up in the interview with the defendant?
Yes, I recall we had quite a lengthy conversation about firearms.
Did you and I discuss the firearms that would have been either in the house or either close to the house?
Yes, I think I made a couple of attempts to try to cover this well. I talked about guns she possessed, that Ryan possessed, guns that were in the house, other places they kept guns. Tried to have that conversation several different ways.
Did you learn that there was a firearm in the bedroom that she was
Yes.
sleeping in?
Yes.
Do you remember what firearm it would have been?
She described it as a .380.
So a .380 caliber handgun?
Yes.
Did she talk to you about Ryan teaching her how to use firearms?
She said that the .380 that she said was in the bedroom in a lockbox had been given to her by Ryan, and that they had sat on the couch and he had demonstrated where the safety was, how to take a magazine in and out. But that was the extent of the instruction that he'd provided her at that time.
As you talked to her about firearms, did you get to learn that she'd used firearms before?
Yes.
She tell you what kind of guns she'd shot before?
She said she'd shot shotgun in high school, but she had never shot a handgun.
When you talk, do you have a discussion about the house, in particular, the entry points in the house, and how visitors will come and go, or how people could come and go in this house?
Yes, having walked the house just shortly before that with Aaron, I tried to make sure I understood how people came and went from the house.
Can you tell the jury what you learned from that conversation?
Yeah, my understanding was, in speaking to Karina, there were only 2 entry points into the house. There was a door in the kitchen that was most typically used, really always used by people to come and go from the house. And there was a door that led to the outside that was in the living room where Ryan had been murdered, but that was rarely used.
Fact, did you learn that only a stranger would use the living room door?
She specifically told me that, and we went over that several times, that the kitchen door was the door that everyone came and went from, and if someone had utilized the living room door, she told me that would be someone who had never been to the house. It would be a stranger.
Did you ask her about her observations of the living room door that night that Ryan was killed?
Yes.
What did she tell you?
She told me she thought the door was closed because if it had been open, she would have remembered that.
In fact, when she talks to you about that living room door, does she tell you the proximity or dimensions with it in regards to Ryan's recliner and where Ryan was found dead?
Yes, the recliner she described blocked that door for the most part and made its use difficult. It couldn't really open and close it well. Particularly, I think she said if Ryan was in the chair or someone was in the chair and it was reclined, it made that door even more unusable.
So she stated it would have obstructed, the recliner would have obstructed
Yes.
the door if it were to be opened with Ryan sleeping on it.
Yes.
Let's talk about the sleeping arrangements, especially in regards to Cade. Were you interested in asking her about where Cade slept and what his sleeping arrangements were?
Yes, I was very interested in that.
As you talk to her about this, what does she tell you?
So she told me that on that night, Kate had slept upstairs, and so that began a conversation where I tried to understand if that was normal for Kate to sleep upstairs or abnormal if he normally slept somewhere else.
And what did you learn from her?
So historically, Kate had spent quite a bit of time actually sleeping down in the living room. She said that he would watch movies with his dad and fall asleep on the couch by his dad, and there'd been attempts over the years to try and get him to sleep in his own bed upstairs.
Did you ask her about her having a conversation with Cade a couple of days before Ryan's death, where she wanted Cade to go sleep upstairs?
Yes, it was my understanding that there may have been a change in his sleeping arrangement within days of Ryan's murder, so I asked if she had specifically, or if someone had specifically had Cade sleeping in his bedroom as of, within days of that time frame or that week.
May we approach her?
You may. A short recess. We need to take up something, and so I would just remind you of the admonition. This shouldn't take too long, so I just remind you of the admonition from last week, and we'll have you back in here shortly. So, thank you. All right, we are back on the record outside the presence of the jury. Oh, yeah, Agent Turbett, I'm sorry, we don't need you to leave. Yeah, sorry, just mean you didn't need to stay in the witness box. Sorry. You maybe have a seat behind counsel. All right, anyway, we're outside the presence of the jury. We have counsel and Ms. Cooper here towards the end there, right before we excuse the jury. Ms. Watt asked to approach, and Ms. Watt is objecting to Mr. Turbett's use of the word murder on several occasions. My understanding is the state does not object to that. Is that correct, Mr. Kodiaga?
That's correct, Judge.
All right, so Agent Turbett, I would just ask and instruct you that when you're referring to Mr. Cooper's death from this point, don't use that word. All right. That satisfy you, Ms. Watt?
Yes, Your Honor.
Any further record you wish to make, Ms. Watt?
No.
Any further record you wish to make, Mr. Kodiaga?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Then why don't we all take, since we're at a little break, anybody need anything, or are you guys good to go? You're good? Mr. Ringle, Mr. Kodiaga, are you good? Or do you need a little break? 5 minutes? All right, we'll take a 5-minute recess. All right. Welcome back. Thanks for your patience, members of the jury. So we're back on the record. We have our jurors, counsel, and parties present. And Agent Turbett, if you want to come back on up to the stand, sir. And Agent Turbett, I would just remind you, even though we took a short break, that you're still under oath. And with that, Mr. Kodiaga, you may resume your direct examination.
Thank you, Judge. You're talking about discussions that she had with you about Cade sleeping upstairs in the days leading to Ryan's killing, correct?
Yes.
And at some point in your questioning, did you ask her if there was a conversation that she would have had with Cade about going to sleep upstairs?
Yes.
During that conversation, did she tell you that she probably could have had that conversation and told him to go sleep upstairs?
At one point she said she probably did, and then she said, yeah, it was likely that had happened.
Do you discuss her marital relationship with Ryan Cooper?
Yes.
Is that an important part of your discussions as an investigator?
Yes.
What does she describe her marriage with Ryan Cooper as being?
Fairly typical question in an interview like this. I ask a person to rate their marriage on a scale of 1 to 10, and I go on to describe that a 1 would be about as bad as it could be, and I told her a 10 would be an excellent marriage. How would you rate you and Ryan's marriage? And she said, no marriage is a 10, so took that off the table, but she said her and Ryan's marriage was at least an 8. They were a great team, and it was a good marriage.
She described herself as a pretty lucky woman.
Yes, she said she was lucky to have married Ryan, and that they were good friends and a good team together several times.
Does she talk about, do you talk about whether there were any arguments or problems in the marriage that she described as an 8 out of 10?
Yes,
Does she tell you what sources of arguments were?
yes.
What does she say?
She says they tease back and forth, and some people could construe that as, going a little too far. But other than that, she says really the only place of contention or arguing, there could be some talk about finances sometimes.
Let's talk about that. In terms of their finances, does she tell you the nature of their finances in the farm that they lived in?
Yes, I understood the overall condition of finances with this farm and where they live to be good, that they live in I think it was a rent-free or a very agreeable kind of situation there. And so
When she says they lived rent-free, in reference to that, is she talking in relation to the Cooper family farm owning much of the property?
That's my understanding. She describes it as that Cooper Farms owns a lot of this land and this buildings, and they're able to live in that place.
Do you ask about her or their financial stability at the time of Ryan's killing?
Yes.
What does she tell you in regards to that?
She says personally they're carrying almost no debt. She mentions that just each of their vehicles still has some debt, but it's in total under $25,000 for she and Ryan's vehicles.
In terms of money-related arguments, what does she tell you that she found unpleasant for her?
She mentions that Ryan would question her about purchases or use of money, and sometimes she felt like she needed to check with him on things when it came to money because he had questioned her about that.
Is that talk related to credit card usage that she would have to get from Ryan?
Yes, I don't know if it was specific to credit cards, but she talked about needing to sometimes get permission, she felt like, to make purchases.
And she didn't like that?
She did not. She said perhaps it could be controlling, and then she said, well, I really don't think he was controlling. So she kind of softened on that, but she did not like being challenged on the purchasing and use of money.
As you talk about the marital relationship, does the name of Huston Danker come up?
Yes.
Are you the one who brings it up?
No.
What does she tell you about Huston Danker?
So as I start to probe whether there was any infidelity or thoughts of infidelity, those kinds of things, she mentions Huston Danker as someone that she had cut hair for.
And that there had been rumors that they were having an affair?
She said yes. Everybody around town had rumored that she and Huston were having an affair.
Does she tell you a time frame of how long she'd been communicating with Huston Danker?
She says about 6 months prior to Ryan's killing, they had started to talk.
Do you ask her what Ryan Cooper's perception of Huston Danker, does that conversation come up?
Yes.
What does she tell you?
She said that Ryan, along with the rest of the town, did not trust Huston. That Ryan believed, like many people, that Huston had slept with older women in the community and was not to be trusted.
So she acknowledged rumors about extramarital relationship, that there were rumors between her and Huston Danker, but when you asked her if this was true, what was her position?
She gave a strong or an adamant denial that there'd been anything, and said that, Ryan had no reason not to trust her, and she had no reason not to trust Ryan.
Claimed that she only cut Huston's hair?
Only cut his hair, and then watched his children several times for him, babysat.
Did you ask her when her last communication or when she was last with Huston Danker?
Yes.
What did she tell you?
Several months after Ryan was killed, she noted was her last communication.
She gave you a date of sometimes in September 2021?
Yes, September 2021 is when she said she last had communication with Huston.
And in regards to that, does she say it's when she cuts his hair?
Yes, I think she pointed to that being the last time that she cut his hair.
Did you ask her about communicating with Huston Danker through Snapchats?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury what she told you about the nature of communication with Huston in regards to using the Snapchat application?
I think she describes it as being fairly light usage, and nothing provocative or anything like that. It was pretty simple use of Snapchat.
And so nothing personal from Huston, just...
Right, I understood that there was little to no kind of back and forth, maybe personally, or it was very minor. Some of that would have been maybe even messages that multiple people would receive. So it was not of a intimate or personal nature.
So like a group message?
Yes, that's how I understood it.
Did you ask her whether she had wondered whether Huston Danker had killed Ryan Cooper?
Yes, I asked her that, or she commented on that.
Do you remember the nature of that part of the conversation?
Yes, she said she had wondered, but in the same sentence she said, but everybody had kind of wondered that, or that had been kind of somewhat typical or kind of town speculation.
Did she linger on that, or she immediately moved on from it?
Very quick, a passing comment.
Did you ask her whether Ryan Cooper had ever accused her of having an affair with Huston?
Yes.
What did she tell you in regards to that?
She said, no, he would have no reason to ever accuse me of that. That's, again, where she told me that he trusted me and I trusted him, and there would have been no point in him asking me about any affairs because they hadn't happened.
You talked about being in that residence prior to talking to the defendant, Ms. Karina Cooper, correct?
Yes.
Can you describe that residence for the jury in terms of the size, like how big, whether it's big, smaller house?
Yes, spending just a little bit of time in the house prior to talking to the defendant, it was noteworthy to me how tight things were. I'm thinking of the bedroom to the bathroom to the kitchen to the living room, the areas that were described for me later by the defendant. This was all very, very close in proximity. It was small.
And we've put on the board what's been admitted as State Exhibit 313. Are you able to see that from where you are, Agent Turbett?
Yes.
When you describe the bedroom, the bathroom, from the bedroom, as you say, again, when she says, I went to the bathroom and then went and looked out of the kitchen window to the driveway, you're saying it's very close quarters.
Yes.
As you talk to her father, does she give a later account of what she thinks the loud noise would have been?
Yes.
What does she say?
So initially it was the shower caddy that she'd kind of detailed and described, and then later she said, after further reflection, she had believed that the crash that woke her the second time when she was woke was actually the screen door from the living room that sometimes the wind would catch and bang into the railing.
So now she gives you an account that what she believes it was the screen door shutting.
Yes.
Sometimes in your discussion, do you bring up the novelty or the use of forensic evidence in your investigations?
Yes.
What in particular do you share or do you tell her?
So again, fairly typical in these interviews, I share some of the technology that law enforcement's able to utilize to gather evidence. I mentioned cell phone activity very quickly, but move on to a concept, I think I refer to it as fencing or geofencing, but this is, again, where there's an ability to track people's usage of their cell phones even when they're just moving around. Advertisers are gathering data, and so beyond just using your cell phone or sending a text messages or kind of conventional pinging of a cell phone, that there's this ability to kind of draw a fence around an area and see which phones have been in the fence and out of the fence. So we call that fencing.
So talk to her about this geofencing technology. What do you observe as you talk to her about this? What do you observe from her?
She nods. She says yes. Doesn't seem surprised by the technology or our use of it.
Appear to be savvy about, have some knowledge about geofencing?
Objection, speculation.
Overruled, you can answer.
Yeah, at that time, geofencing was even less known than it is now. So you would, the typical person when we say that thing would not have a lot of knowledge about the use of geofencing or how we would be able to put cell phone usage in or out of a certain area.
So you talk, and so she appears to be very savvy about it.
Yes, somebody would have to be knowledgeable about technology, I would think, to understand that was something that, I learned about through law enforcement use.
At this time, as you talk about geofencing, are you discussing the nature of the investigation and what you're seeing from what the phones will be saying?
Eventually, yes. So the conversation starts broad, just about different tools that we utilize. I talk about a couple of other electronic items that could be at our disposal, and then I draw that back to the case at hand and talk about what we'd be able to tell about what happened that night in that area.
As you tell about this, does a body language or a demeanor change?
No.
As you, at some point in this discussion, does she become agitated?
Yes.
Is that when you started questioning what she told you?
Yes, I start to move from general application of the things that we talked about, the electronic evidence and those kinds of things, to what happened that night. And she became upset with me and said I was accusing her.
Claimed you're accusing her. Did you tell her you just wanted to know what had happened to Ryan?
Yes, I encouraged her to continue to talk to me and help me understand what happened that night in the house.
And what did she tell you in that regards to what happened, if she knew what happened to Ryan?
She tells me that if she knew who had done this to her husband, she would be in jail because she would have, in her words, she would have already killed that motherfucker.
Did she, in fact, at this point, chase you out of her property?
Yes, she told me to get off her property. And that was the last thing that I just said that she said to me as I was still encouraging her to sit down and continue telling me what happened that night.
She told you she was hiring a private investigator
Yes,
to solve this killing of Ryan?
yes,
Now, you spent a considerable lengthy time talking to the defendant, Ms. Cooper, correct?
yes, I believe just a little over 3 hours that day.
In these 3 hours that you spent with the defendant, did she ever tell you that she was sending Snapchat messages to Huston Danker at 3:30 a.m. on the morning that Ryan was killed?
No, nowhere in that description that I'd asked her to give me to walk through the night did she tell me that.
Did she tell you that she was awake at 4:13 in the morning or thereabouts, deleting or looking up something on her phone?
No,
Did she tell you that about 3:32 or thereabouts a.m. that morning that she and Mr. Huston Danker were talking about her remembering to pick the shell casings?
there was no mention of that at all.
Did she acknowledge receiving a text message, a Snapchat message from Huston Danker at 4:42 a.m. stating, "Yep, just woke up"?
No. No acknowledgement of any messaging between the two of them that morning.
Did she tell you that when she found Ryan Cooper in the living room bleeding, whether she rendered any aid to Ryan Cooper?
She did not tell me that she had rendered aid in any way.
Did she tell you whether she checked for a pulse or heartbeat or anything to that extent?
No, that was not part of any of the description of events.
At some point in your conversation, do you talk about Michael Cole's clutch that was found in the driveway?
Not specifically, but a purse or something to that effect.
What would have been a clutch, correct?
Yes, yes.
Did she explain to you why that clutch was out in the driveway?
No, she acknowledged that that it was outside with no explanation for why it was out there.
During this discussion, you talked about her telling you about finances. Did she disclose to you that a bank had been urging her urgently to transfer money for overdrafts in days leading up to the killing of Ryan Cooper?
No,
Did she tell you that she made about 170 steps between 4:23 a.m. and 4:30 or so a.m. that morning?
no,
As part of your investigation, do you at some point talk to, or the man we've talked about, Huston Danker?
yes, I do talk to him.
Do you remember the day that you talked to Huston Danker?
Yes, that would be October, I believe, 27th of 2023.
Prior.
May we approach them, Your Honor?
You may. We may have several breaks, so we do need to take something else up with just council and parties. So I am gonna take another break, and we'll say it'll be at least 10 minutes. So just so you folks know where kind of the time frame. And I would just remind you of that admonition again: keep an open mind, don't talk to anybody, don't let anybody talk to you, and don't do any sort of investigation or research, and stay away from any media accounts. So with that, we'll see you no sooner than 10 minutes. All right, so what I know at this point, which isn't much, is that we're going to get into some questioning of Agent Turbett related to his interview of Mr. Danker, and that the defendant has an objection to that. And so why don't we start with you, Ms. Watt, and let me know what the defendant's objection is.
Thank you. We're not objecting to the interview that he gave to police in 2021. My specific objection is to the interview he gave in 2023. And because it's my understanding that the statements will come in if they're in furtherance of the conspiracy and up and until the conspiracy or the objective has been completed. It's our position that the statements in 2023 made to law enforcement, at that time, the conspiracy has ended. I know that the state is going to say that this is part of the cover-up, but there is some case law, at least the case that I found in Iowa, I believe, was State v. Waterbury, 307 Northwest 2nd, 45, Iowa, 1981. In that case, there's a statement given to police by a co-conspirator that occurs within 6 hours of the event. Because basically, the conspiracy at issue here is the conspiracy to commit murder. So the objective is to finish the murder. And in the Waterbury case, that person gives a false statement to the police about who killed the person within 6 hours of the event. I can't find any cases that specifically allow for statements by a co-conspirator that are made years after the event, and it's my position that the cover-up doesn't last for years. And also the cover-up is not part of the conspiracy, as clearly in every case, people don't want to get caught. That is just part of any crime, and so that's not necessarily the cover-up, just every statement anybody makes. I have some indication here that while there may be a subsidiary conspiracy to conceal the crime after the central purpose has been achieved, such a subsidiary conspiracy may not be implied from the circumstantial evidence showing merely that the conspiracy and that the conspirators took care to cover up their crime to escape detention and punishment. Because here, the conspiracy again is to kill Ryan. It's unreasonable to say and believe that every single thing that Huston says to police up until his arrest counts as a statement by a co-conspirator. Further, we don't have any indication that these two are even still talking. I think Agent Turbett has testified that Karina said that the last time she spoke to Huston was in September of 2021, and I haven't heard any evidence suggesting that they spoke after that or closer in time to 2023. So our position is essentially that the concealment phase doesn't last forever, and this is too distant and too remote from the actual event and the objective of the conspiracy. Thank you.
And so the hearsay, it's hearsay based on, because it doesn't meet that conspiracy exception.
Yes.
And the quote you just gave, was that from the case that you cited, the 307 Northwest 45? Or was that from some
I
other?
don't know that it was. I would have to look and try and figure out where exactly I got that from.
But that's the right site, 307 Northwest 45?
That is the citation for the case I could find that's most close to this.
And to be clear, again, you guys have better information. There was a 2021 interview of Mr. Danker, and we're not talking about that. If the state is going to offer evidence related to that, you don't have an objection.
No objection to that one. I think there's only two interviews, one in 21. Well, there's three, one in 21, one in 23, and one in 24. I don't think the state intends to go into the one in 24.
All right. So who's Mr. Kodiaga?
For the purpose of consistency, I know Mr. Ringle has argued this with the court before. We'll let Mr. Ringle argue this part.
All right.
Thank you, Judge. The state is relying on State v. Tangi, that's 616 Northwest 2nd, 564, and other similar cases, and noting that
I'm sorry, 616 Northwest 2nd. Give me that last bit again.
564.
Okay.
In noting that the conspiracy can continue to the concealment phase, I believe there's a number of cases where statements were admitted that essentially involve covering up the crime that was committed and misleading the police. Now, the cover-up in and of itself, or a cover-up of a crime, doesn't necessarily constitute a conspiracy, thereby allowing information or otherwise hearsay statements to be admitted. But when a conspiracy is found to pre-exist, and then there are statements made in furtherance of that conspiracy, including cover-up, they are admissible. And I think that's an important distinction here, and I think that's what's outlined in Tansy and other similar cases. From the state's perspective, the information that we'll be admitting essentially is in furtherance of the conspiracy in the sense that it is information that from the state's perspective appears to be agreed upon by the two parties here. There's a striking similarity between the information that they're providing to law enforcement, and so it's the state's position that this is in fact in furtherance of the conspiracy.
And again, I don't know what the statements are. Presumably, it would be kind of a statement-by-statement analysis, right? I mean, wouldn't you have to analyze each statement by Mr. Danker to determine whether or not it's in furtherance of the conspiracy? I don't know how long this interview is, but I mean, again, I haven't seen it. I haven't been provided a transcript of it. I don't know what's in there. And so, I mean, the defendant's essentially saying it should be blanketly excluded. You're essentially saying it should be blanketly, admitted. And isn't it a more, I guess, refined analysis than that?
Judge, I think it probably is a little more refined, and I think it is more nuanced. I do think that once the court has made a determination that a conspiracy exists, those statements made by the co-conspirator are not hearsay. They're statements by a party opponent. I think that the statements that are relevant to the analysis that the state believes are in furtherance of the conspiracy, in other words, statements made to conceal not only the objective of the crime, but the fact that the crime occurred at all, do come in. And then I think statements that are necessary to explain the context in which those statements were made would come in as well. That's what the state intends to admit. I don't believe the state intends to simply hit play or talk about everything that Huston Danker said to law enforcement.
All right. And just so we're clear on where we're at as far as the conspiracy, it's my understanding, at least for purposes of this, Ms. Cooper is not contesting, for purposes of this analysis, Ms. Cooper is not contesting the existence of a conspiracy for purposes of this analysis.
Correct.
All right. So that's...
Well, we are saying the conspiracy has ended.
I understand. That's a different analysis. You're saying there was for purposes of this analysis, there was a conspiracy. So statements properly made during the course of that conspiracy are not hearsay. Your argument, again, is the conspiracy's ended, and that still, even then, you've got to determine that the statement has been made in furtherance of the conspiracy cover-up. And again, I guess my point is each particular statement would need to meet that analysis. So let me bring this back a second. We have a 2021 interview that apparently there's no dispute about. Are you planning on offering that interview as well, or
Portions,
not?
yes.
I'm sorry, portions, yes? All right. Well, anything else, Ms. Watt or Mr. Ringle? Ms. Watt, your microphone's on, and so I can't hear you very well.
I think the place I was getting my information where I was talking about subsidiary conspiracies. Could be U.S. v. Lombard, Lombard, 72 F. 3rd, 170, First Circuit, 1995. I also have possibly Grunewald v. United States. That's Grunewald, 353 U.S. 391, 1957. If I narrow it down better, I will let you know.
All right. Mr. Ringle, anything further on your end?
If I may have just a moment here.
Yeah.
Judge, I would just note that I'm not aware of any case that indicates essentially a time bar on the length of a conspiracy and how long that conspiracy can continue after the time of the killing. Other than that, I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
All right. Well, what I'm going to do is take 5 or so minutes, take a quick look at these cases you've cited, and we'll come back in and I'll make a ruling on this and bring the jury back in. All right? So we'll be in recess for approximately 5 minutes, maybe a few more. We'll see how quickly I can get this done. All right. right, we are back on the record outside the presence of the jury. We have counsel and Ms. Cooper present. I believe off the record, Mr. Ringle, you indicated you had something additional you wished to tell me perhaps related to this matter?
Judge, thank you. I believe the parties are largely on the same page with regard to which statements are going to come in. They do apply primarily, perhaps if not exclusively, to the earlier interview, the 2021 interview. With regard to timelines and the length of the conspiracy, I would just point the court to State versus Ross, which is 573 Northwest 2nd 906.
I've got that pulled up. That was the case I found when doing my research as well. All right, anything further from either Mr. Ringle or Ms. Watt?
I just didn't hear the citation.
It's 573 Northwest 2nd 906, State v. Ross.
Thank you.
All right. So, just want to make sure. Nothing further, Mr. Ringle?
Correct, nothing further.
Nothing further, Ms. Watt?
No, thank you.
All right. Well, so again, I know Ms. Cooper's not contesting this for purposes of these statements, and I don't believe did for prior statements that may have come in as well, because no objection was made. But just so it's clear, I do believe that there is a preponderance of the evidence that supports the existence of a conspiracy in this case, and that's based on the testimony and evidence that's already been received, as well as the court's review of Exhibits 1 and 2 that were offered by the state previously. So once a conspiracy has been established, then statements made by a co-conspirator are not hearsay. If two conditions are established, one, the statement has to be made during the course of the conspiracy, and it must be made in the promotion of the conspiracy's object or design. As I mentioned, I also took a look at State v. Ross, and that's an Iowa Supreme Court case from 1998, 573 Northwest 2nd 906 as the site. In that case, the hotly contested issue was whether the statements were made in furtherance of the conspiracy, and the court, quoting from the case, it says, as in most illegal schemes, the perpetrators agree either expressly or tacitly that they will do whatever it takes to conceal the scheme from victims and from authorities. They do so to continue the scheme, or at least to keep the fruits of it, and to avoid prosecution. And anyway, they go on in that case to admit statements that were made allegedly in that case in furtherance, as part of the alleged concealment phase in furtherance of the conspiracy. So based on that case and the authorities cited in that case, I do believe that statements that are part of a concealment phase, even if they're 2 years later, would be admissible. I mean, it makes no logical sense that there would be a timeline on concealment of a crime between co-conspirators, 20 years down the road, if people are, had committed a crime, conspired to commit a crime together, and were still engaged in concealing it up. Logically, why should that be treated differently than something 6 months after the crime? So anyway, for those reasons, to the extent the statements in the interview are offered part of the concealment phase, the objection's overruled, and we can move forward. Any questions related to that, or are we ready to proceed? I'll start with you, Mr. Ringle.
Judge, I don't believe so. Thank you.
Ms. Watt, any questions on your end?
No.
Okay. Then I'm going to step out, grab Erin, and see if she can bring the jury back in, and then we'll get started. And just so I'm not planning on taking another break before the lunch recess. Everybody going to be good with that? 2 minutes. All right, we're back on the record with our jurors, counsel, and parties present. And again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. And we have Agent Turbett back on the stand. And again, I would remind you that even though we took a short break, you are still under oath. And with that, Mr. Kodiaga, you may resume your direct examination.
Thank you, Judge. Agent Turbett, before we took a break, we had started talking about Huston Danker, whose name had come up in the investigations, correct?
Yes.
As part of your investigation, I think your testimony earlier was at some time in October of 2023, you do personally talk to Huston Danker, correct?
Yes.
Prior to talking to Mr. Danker in October of 2023, had you or one of your other agents talked to Mr. Danker in close proximity to the time of Ryan Cooper's death?
Yes, my colleague, a fellow DCI agent, spoke to Huston.
You reviewed that interview with Mr. Danker prior to even talking to him before talking to him in 2023, correct?
Yes, I reviewed the June 18th.
On June 18th, is that June 18th, 2021?
Yes.
The day that Ryan Cooper was killed.
Yes.
Reviewing that, did you understand that that Huston Danker was asked about her communication with the defendant Karina Cooper over Snapchat?
Yes.
What was his response to that?
Again, I think he says there's no real communication going on via Snapchat.
When you say that, can you elaborate on what he says more on that?
I think he admits to some messaging, but again, there's nothing intimate or personal going on.
Does he give a frequency of how often he being Huston Danker and Karina Cooper would communicate on Snapchat?
Once or twice a week.
Does he give a time frame of how long they would have been communicating?
I don't remember. It might have been a period of several months, 3 or 4 months.
But otherwise, these are random snaps, not anything.
Yes.
Does he get asked what his relationship with Karina Cooper entails?
Yes.
What does he say?
Again, she's been cutting his hair. I think he says at that point, maybe for a period of a couple of years. And they have just had what he would describe as kind of a typical conversation almost between the person getting the haircut and the person doing it.
Is Huston Danker asked if there was any problem between him and Ryan Cooper, especially as regards Snapchats?
Yes.
What's his response?
No problem between he and Ryan with regard specifically to anything to do with Snapchat.
Is he asked how he will describe his relationship with the defendant, Karina Cooper?
Yes, the agent asked him to talk about that.
What, in Huston Danker's words, how does he describe himself in terms of his relationship with Karina Cooper?
Huston tells the agent at that time that he's like a gay best friend to Karina, totally platonic. There's no sexual or romantic interest. So he says it's like a gay best friend.
Is he at this time confronted whether he was having an affair or a sexual affair with Karina Cooper?
He's asked that, yes.
And what's is his response still that no, it's just a gay best friend?
Yes, strong denial to any affair.
Does he acknowledge that there are rumors in the community that they are having a sexual relationship?
He does. He says during this time of her cutting his hair, they've talked about relationships and kids and life, and he has shared that he has a couple of young children. He's a single dad, so Karina has apparently done a little bit of babysitting, so he says the community picks up on the fact that his truck is over at the Cooper house on one occasion, and so the rumor has started that they're having an affair and that he is, in his words, banging Karina, having sex with her.
And so he says Karina has been watching his kids, and that's the extent, and that's what's led to the rumors, because the defendant has been babysitting his kids, his being Huston Danker's kids.
Yes, Houston's very clear in the June 18, 2021 interview that she just cuts his hair and then she has babysat for him. I think he puts it at several times, just a few times. And that is what has started the rumors in the community.
Is he asked if there's been any inappropriate Snapchats or messages between him, being Huston Danker, and the defendant, Karina Cooper?
Yes.
What's his response to that?
He says absolutely no inappropriate Snapchatting going between them.
Thank you very much, Agent Turbett. At this point, Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Ms. Watt?
Thank you. I understand you interviewed Karina, was it 2023?
Yes, May 4th, 2023.
And Aaron Cooper was there at the time as well?
He met on the driveway and was there for a short bit, and then he ended up leaving and staying in the area.
Was there a time where Karina wanted Aaron to stand by and be with her during the interview?
There was some discussion of that.
Okay. So at least at that time, Aaron and Karina appeared to be on good terms?
Seemed courteous, yeah, as we stood in the driveway and talked for a few minutes.
There's been a lot of talk about this Rottweiler dog and how the dog might be expected to behave. Did you review the body cam of Deputy Fangman?
No, I did.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
When he arrives on scene?
No, I did not.
Okay. So I guess, have you observed for yourself how this dog behaves?
No. I've only been told by others.
Is most of what you discussed with Karina on some sort of recording?
So the interview, as I said, or the total recording from the time I pull up in the driveway, I believe is 3 hours and 10 minutes. What you can hear is I activate my recorder immediately. I actually put a header on saying I've just arrived, the date and time. I get out and introduce myself, and at some point, unbeknownst to me, that recorder immediately malfunctions. It stops. I don't catch that until I'm now pretty far into my conversation with just Karina. I look down, so we're at about the 2-hour mark of my total time there, and I see the recorder has malfunctioned, so I immediately turn it on, and I'd taken good handwritten notes, so I recap everything with her and then continue on.
But with DCI agents, you do not have a body cam. It's only an audio recording?
That's correct.
You talked about how you talked to Karina about this geofencing, right?
Yes.
As an investigator, are you allowed to, is one of your tactics basically to sometimes tell people you have things that you may actually not have?
We would imply that we certainly have a better understanding or have more knowledge than we do sometimes, yes.
Okay. So officers are allowed to lie to people?
They are. The Supreme Court has said that.
It's my understanding, in looking at your notes from the recording at least, that you explained to Karina how geofencing works.
Yes, in some type of kind of simple fashion.
Okay. And also how cell tower data works.
Again, in a simple way, yes. I think.
Right. But she didn't say, hold up, I already know all these things.
She did not. She just nodded and says yes.
Do we have geofencing information in this case that you're aware of?
I actually don't know. You'd have to speak to somebody on the technology side.
Okay. Do you, so I imagine then you don't necessarily know what the geofence actually captures and is capable of?
In this case,
In any?
it's not my area of expertise, so we would rely on other people. Geofencing has been used, and we would just ask what's been captured in a case-by-case basis if that's utilized.
Okay. So you wouldn't know whether the geofence actually captures every phone that travels through that fence?
In this case again, or?
In any?
I don't know how tightly someone would describe that. I guess you'd have to talk to somebody that has better understanding of that.
The conversation with Huston Danker in 2021 that we're discussing, that was captured on a video recording, correct?
It was.
Okay, you had a chance to look at that?
I did.
Would you agree with me that his statements, the best evidence of those would be actually watching the video?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd like to play that video and I'd mark it as Defendant's Exhibit C and ask that it be admitted.
Any objection?
No objection.
So it appears to me we have half of it working at this point. That be fair?
That is fair.
Council approach. I think with the agreement of council is we're going to move forward with, I think, questioning of witnesses, and we're going to try to set aside things that require use of technology at this point till maybe over the, and give council some time over the lunch hour to hopefully get squared away with all the tech issues that may crop up. So with that, we'll come back to playing that interview at a later point. Ms. Watt, why don't you go ahead then with your cross-examination?
I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
All right. Any redirect, Mr. Kodiaga?
Just to be clear, when you asked about the video recording that we were unable to play in regards to it being best evidence, is that just because it will have more details of exactly every word that was spoken?
Yes.
But your summary or summation to the jury is pretty much what that 20 minutes, what is said within that 20 minutes of that interview.
Yes, and what I said was accurate.
And pretty accurate to the flavor of what was said in that 20 minutes of that interview.
Very much so.
You talked about your interview being recorded by an audio recorder, correct?
Yes.
And even though your recorder failed, you still were able to capture a lot and go through the same with the defendant, Karina Cooper, of what you'd covered before.
Yes, I took very detailed notes, which we always do as a backup because malfunctions happen with those recorders in the field. And then I reread those things back to her to make sure I understood them correctly from my notes, and she agreed.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Any recross?
When I'm saying best evidence, I mean, wouldn't it be, as an investigator, you're evaluating somebody's credibility, right?
I am when I talk to people, sure.
Okay, so when I say best evidence, it's just sometimes better to talk or see the person and hear the words come out of their mouth on a video.
You would have the benefit of visual, and you would have more detail, as the prosecution said.
Right. That's all. Thank you.
Anything further, Mr. Kodiaga?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you. Agent Turbett, you may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.